So it's okay to begin recording, and we extend a warm welcome to folks listening and watching from wherever you are, and especially from Sanghas in Madison, England, Switzerland, and Alpine, Texas, and our dear friends in Hawaii and Chicago. So today, let's just fix this a little bit. Today I want to talk about the Liberation Project. So there's a lot of discussion, of course, at this time of the year around freedom and our conventional concepts of freedom. So our concepts really include this idea of choice, that is, I get to choose, and control. No one can tell me what to do. So those are our conventional notions, and also decisions. And we remember George Bush famously saying, "I'm the decider." So we have this idea that having freedom means being able to make decisions. And it includes a freedom from whatever is undesired and a freedom to think, say, or do whatever I want. It also includes a little sense of defiance, I think, of the wishes of others, of convention, of rules, of expectations, as we have in our history from the colonists defying the British, right? So there's a kind of aspect of it, I think, is kind of like a toddler. That is, there's an aspect of conventional ideas of freedom that's sort of driven by impulses and moment-to-moment impulses. We don't think a toddler is bad, but a toddler is not a grown-up. And then there's also a sense that comes from the idea of thinking of like a teenager, which is being driven to self-expression and self-rule, autonomy, experimentation, sometimes dangerous, and discovering their power. And again, we don't think teenagers are bad, but a teenager is not a grown-up. We kind of live in an adolescent society, as it turns out. So it's hard to see the appeal of something like Zen monastic training. So our Zen training is about relinquishment of individual choice and individual control. The schedule's entirely determined. In my monastic training, the wake-up bell is at 3:50 a.m., and we're in the Zendo by 4:20. Work is assigned. Typically, it's both menial and hard. Clothing, you wear robes like everybody else. You don't have any choice there. Even your body, your head is shaven, there are bathing days, your comportment is determined. In the Zendo, there's bowing, posture, and movement is all constrained and prescribed. Meals are, and outside the Zendo, you're moving in the monastery in pretty much determined ways also. So the meals are plain and simple, at precise schedules, not necessarily what you would choose, not necessarily when you would want to eat. Meditation, there are requirements for Zazen and instructions from the teacher, and also reporting into the teacher about your meditation practice. There's study. You study what you're asked to study. Technology and social media? No. Coordination with others? You're in shared living spaces. You're in shared meditation spaces. I was actually in a 3-sided cubicle, so no privacy there. You're coordinating your activities, your work, and even your free time is with other monastics. So you have a lot of common experiences. So you have to wonder, how free is this? Why would anyone want to do it? But somehow people do. So I want to say a little bit more about our ideas of freedom, because they seem to devolve around central concepts of I, me, and mine. So I can go where I want to. I can do what I please. I can say whatever I want to. I can have whatever I want. That's the I part of it. Me, I am who I am. For example, I'm white. I'm a woman, I'm retired, I'm a professor, I'm a Zen priest, I'm an Austinite, but not a Texan. It's sort of like being spiritual but not religious, right? I have my history, my story, my traumatic childhood, my education, my marriage. I get to be who I want to be. No one tells me what to do or how to behave. I have my bundle of conditioning, my preferences, my requirements and expectations. These are all how I understand me. My requirements and expectations of myself, of others, of the world. I have my worries, my grief, my likes and dislikes, my difficulties and troubles, my sorrows and my traumas. And then there's mine. These are the things that belong to me. My house, my car, my books, my clothes, my dishes, my groceries, my physical body, not quite as controllable as I would like, and still aging. My family, although they seem to do as they please also. My work, my judgments of myself, of others, of the world, my spiritual path. These are the things that belong to me. My mistakes, my grievances, my opinions, my parts, my Buddha nature. All of this, all of the clinging to I, me, and mine is a source of suffering. When we talk about liberation in Zen, we're not really talking about freedom in any of these conventional ways. And I think this is puzzling for people. So I want to talk a little bit about some of what it is. First of all, it's a release from I, me, and mine, and from all of the protections we have to erect to consolidate and to ensure the continuity of I, me, and mine. It's a release from conditioning, which is a form of enslavement. So it doesn't mean that your conditioning goes away, but it no longer confines you. When we work with our conditioning, we're working actually to make it more transparent, not to get rid of it, so that we can see through it to what lies beyond it. It's a release from requirements of myself, of others, and of the world. So we always have these kind of subtle requirements that that things don't meet our expectations or our needs or what we want. And that reveals those requirements. That everyone on the road should let me have free access to as fast as I want to go, as slow as I want to go, stopping when I feel like stopping. We can see the little bits of distress that we create for ourselves through our requirements. It's released from agitation, our agitation around our need to fix things that we perceive are wrong, or to avoid what I don't like, or to grasp or cling to what I do want. It's also released from the opposite of that, which is numbing out in all the ways that we have now to do that. Net surfing, binge watching, drinking, overeating, shopping, even meditation can be used as a way of numbing ourselves out. So we have to be mindful of that abuse of our meditation practice, right? It's a release from goals, from outcomes, from achievement, from ambition and striving, and from management. This is really antithetical to everything that culture is teaching about productivity, about setting goals, about meeting goals, about tracking goals, about metrics that show whether you're meeting your goals, setting goals for other people who work for you. And so it's interesting how punitive the whole concept of goals actually is. We're forever not there, right? We're forever not yet reaching our goal. We're forever setting new goals when it looks like we might reach our goal. And we're forever organizing ourselves in the service of these goals, which are ever elusive and ever far away. So there's a strain built into the whole notion of goals. And of course, this always troubled my students when I would talk about this in my Zen rhetoric classes, because they were very goal-oriented, and they had been trained to be quite goal-oriented. And they had no concept that you could be wholehearted and energetic without being attached to an outcome or a goal. That really didn't make any sense to them. They couldn't really understand, how could you be wholehearted? And they argued fiercely that desire was necessary in order for there to be any human progress, in order for anything to get done, in order for them to make their way through school. So it was hard for me to convince them that the wholehearted love of learning would carry them in ways that being attached to a goal would never serve them. So we focused more, I focused a lot more attention with helping them understand the ways in which you can be vigorous and energetic without being attached to a goal which is going to cause you suffering and other people. And it's also a release from the hindrances, and we're familiar with these hindrances from Buddhist teachings. The hindrances of self-desire, sense desire, which we can see in our rampant consumerism and a sort of materialistic culture. Other hindrances include anger and ill will, which is our rage at the world. Why is it like this? Why isn't it the way I want it to be? Why are these people behaving like this? Why are these people such buttheads, This is kind of our ongoing quarrel with the world, right, is fueled by this anger. And then sloth and torpor, which is the flip side of that coin, where we become mindless and careless, and we just grab something to eat from the drive-thru, or we just feel sluggish and dull, and we don't exercise our minds. So we sort of give in to our tendencies and impulses. And then restlessness and worry, which serve nothing, but which do keep us agitated. And finally, doubt. Once we sort of release our doubt, we're just sort of settle down in this path and realize, oh, this is where I am. This is exactly where I am. And there's much to learn about that, and there's a lot to be curious about. So doubt is considered a hindrance when it's disabling. It's not a hindrance when it's a part of inquiry, when it's a part of our curiosity. When we say, I'm not so sure I believe that. I wonder if there's some other way to think about that. So that leads to also another thing that is part of this liberation project is accepting not knowing, which drops us into wonder and awe and some kind of acceptance of things as they are and a kind of openness to possibility and potential. Because as soon as we know, we've sort of shut down the potential for openness, for new possibilities. And then also this sense of non-striving, not striving to be or to do or to fix anything. So this liberation project has some priorities. The priorities are this sense of spaciousness and a kind of intimacy that's without barriers, and that intimacy is with all things. A kind of appreciation that opens up as soon as we drop our requirements and our demands of the world, and we begin to recognize all that there is to appreciate. Another priority is awareness. We want to be awake in this life. We want this awareness that gives us a sense of the fullness of life and a 360-degree view. So when I was still teaching on campus, I told my students I don't have a television set, and I haven't had a television set for 20 years, and I could hear an audible gasp in the classroom and they were so confused, and I said, well, you should try it. You should try just like turn off a screen and go outdoors. Whether it's your phone or your computer or your tablet or your TV, just turn it off and go outdoors. And afterwards, they write in their learning records how they tried it. I tried what Professor Syverson said to try, and it was amazing. I said, you have a 360-degree immersive experience with all the senses activated. So when you're just sitting looking at a piece of glass with a picture behind it, you don't have that immersive experience. So that is part of that open awareness that we realize in this liberation. We also begin to recognize and foster skillful means for realizing the path and for the liberation of beings. So I think about the Dalai Lama's priority saying, my religion is kindness. And Uman saying, enlightenment is an appropriate response. So our priorities become then cultivating the paramitas, the 6 paramitas of generosity and morality and patience and energy and vigor, concentration and wisdom. So when you think about that, you think, well, what is true liberation worth to you? What would you release? What would you include? What would you take up? So liberated beings align with these priorities for all of their choices, all of their decisions, all of their thought, all of their speech, and all of their actions. They just bring their lives into alignment with their priorities and their aspirations and intentions. So I had a little activity for us. I know you really identify me with these little activities. So this involves doing a little bit of exploring in writing. So you need to get some writing tools if you don't have writing tools, some paper and some pencil. Okay. I don't know yet. I can't quite tell if everybody's got something to write with, but hopefully you do. So we'll do a little bit of exploring. It comes out of a quote from John Ruskin, the 19th century philosopher, who famously said, "No man was ever so free as a fish." I'm not entirely sure that's true, but we can do a little bit of exploring. And what I'd like you to do is just get mindful for a moment and recall a time when you felt most free, any time in your life, any time at all. Sometime when you felt most free. And think about, how old were you? Where were you and what were you doing? So try to recall as many details as you can about that experience. You might recall a sky filled with clouds, or what you were wearing, or who else was there, what was said, or what you were doing. As you recall that time, what happens to your body? And how does it feel inside? So write a little brief description of that experience. And just take a few moments, maybe about 5 minutes, and write as much as you can recall about that experience, when you felt most free. Yes, definitely. Sandra?
Yes, Beck, thank you for the exercise. Really was very, very helpful. But I wanted to ask you a question, because one thing that I was talking with the ladies that I was sharing with this is one thing when you are in that dukkha, in that moment, suffering, the the metta phrases, the loving kindness is helpful. And so you can be in that freedom, liberation that can help. Is anything else that besides the metta, the loving kindness can help you when you are in that?
You mean when you're in when you're bound up in dukkha?
Yes, when you're bandao in dukkha.
Yeah, I think that's another good opportunity for the Brahma Vihara practice of radiating kindness and radiating compassion and radiating empathetic joy and radiating equanimity. But you might need to first radiate it toward yourself, and you might need to recall instances when you were the recipient of those qualities, those Brahma Viharas. I think those things are helpful. I also think it can be helpful when you're in the sort of pit of suffering to do the simple steps of the Anapanasati Sutta, the 16 steps,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you have anxiety, because that mindfulness of breathing settles the anxiety
Mm-hmm.
and begins to focus your energy. So, and then drops you into mindfulness of impermanence, mindfulness of dispassion, mindfulness of cessation, everything that's arising will cease, and mindfulness of letting go. So those things can be helpful, I think, when people are struggling in various ways. Yeah, sometimes it's not so helpful to just sit in shikantaza and open awareness because you're too rattled by what you're going through, or there's too much background stress, and you can just get more agitated, or you can just get more depressed if you don't have some tools to work with.
Mhm. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, those are the things that I would recommend anyway. Those 16 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta are potent if you do them for 3 breaths for each step, for example. It's really powerful. So helpful.
Peg,
Yes.
I might add too that I found it helpful for me that if one does the practice of thinking of your own ancestors or the people who have helped you along
Uh-huh.
during your lifetime, and have those people, imagine them being there with you and feeling
Yeah.
the equanimity or the sympathetic joy that they have had for you and that they have for you,
Yes.
the loving kindness and the compassion. So that can be a good, a good
Absolutely.
source of
Yeah.
feeling that.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
feel like you got somebody there on your side. You got some folks there that are there with you.
Yeah. And if you can't think of anybody else, the Buddhas and the ancestors will sit with you. And if you invoke the Buddhas and the ancestors, they can support you and assist you. Yeah. So this is great. I think I wanted people to hold in mind the the potential for this kind of absolute liberation. Sometimes I think we forget in our sort of daily lives, and we get bound up in various struggles on the public stage or in our own minds, and we forget the potential for real liberation. And that may mean some changes, but it may be that you're able to just simply settle down in the life you're in with that liberatory potential. So, so that's why we sit, really, is to get connected to that which is totally free within us and around us. So in my group, people mostly described moments they were in nature in one way or another. So that connection with nature is very important for us to have this sense of liberatory potential, I think. Yeah, and to feel deeply grounded. Anything else? Anyone? I'm trying to see if people have hands up.
I don't see anyone. Oh,
Yeah.
Kim does.
Kim? Yeah, there we go.
Uh, one of my times was when I was actually driving down the street and thinking that my whole life was going to be changed and everything was going to be good. And I started whistling, and then I realized that whenever I caught myself whistling, I would be really happy, and I haven't whistled for a long time. And then I was thinking, well, is that really like an immoral thing to do today, to be whistling? With the world the way it is. I mean, what would someone think of me if I mean, like if you're watching this terrible tragedy and you start whistling, it seems like, there's a
Sometimes
certain
that's all you can do.
kind of obscenity to that.
I think it
Maybe.
can gladden the heart of the people around you.
Yeah.
I do.
Imagine someone walking down the street whistling. What would you think of them? Or,
I would think, wow, they're happy.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes.
And you would
Yeah.
and then you would give others the occasion for empathetic joy. Yeah. I asked Flint I said to Flint one time, my personal koan is it possible to be happy if a single other person is unhappy? And
So
it's
what's the
not.
answer? It's, what?
It's a koan.
Oh,
Yeah.
This is what you're asking.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's the question, right?
And there was that nice story about the Dalai Lama where he was visiting a hospital or something, and with every person he was very sad. And then he came out and someone told a joke and he started laughing. So certainly he can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of what we can do is bring joy to people in difficult circumstances like we're in right now. So that's in my way of thinking anyway. That's a beneficence. So so that people can be heartened in the midst of trouble and struggle. And so that they can have courage, and so that they can have patience, and so that they can have stamina. And they can only do that if we encourage and hearten each other. So that's my understanding is it's our duty to be happy. Because if you were in a war-torn country, let's say, and you could have a little, let's say a little view, a little zoom view maybe, of the life that you are living right now, wouldn't you be incensed if that person wasn't happy? Wouldn't you be infuriated that someone could have all that you have and still be unhappy? So that's how I think about it sometimes. Is that it's our responsibility to appreciate what is all around us.
Yeah, and sometimes we have that thought about our kids,
Yeah.
where they have everything that they could possibly want, and
they're still
complaining.
unhappy. Yeah.
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 But I want 3 cookies.
Yeah, so I think it's important. I think it's important to remember our responsibility through our equanimity and through our empathetic joy to share what joy there is in the world. It's not all unhappiness. There's lots of trouble in the world, but there has always been a lot of trouble in the world. And we think our trouble is more important than the other troubles that have happened in the world, I think. But I think what we have to do is recognize our duty, our responsibility as bodhisattvas.
You had mentioned a few weeks ago sutta as opposed to dukkha. The other side. Am I
Sukha.
saying it wrong?
Sukha.
Sukha.
Yeah.
And so I started reading about that. That was very interesting. But we don't talk about that very much.
No. But
We
those are the
think
opposite.
that there is only dukkha because there is dukkha.
Well, because it catches our attention. It's the focus of our attention. And partly because we're hardwired for negativity. Like we're hardwired to look for what's going wrong. So that's our tendency, our biological tendency, because of course it has some survival value. So we feel attached to that. But it's our responsibility. I think of it as a moral responsibility to appreciate all the good and to celebrate all the good that we're experiencing and that we see in the world. That's the ethical responsibility, not to be sad because there are sad things happening. Sandra, did you have something?
Yes, I really thank you when you're saying about the responsibility to be happy. That really remind me that when you go to, this little village in Peru or in Mexico, the children, they don't have sometimes where the conditions are very poor, and they always smiling, they always laughing. And
Yeah.
the people, the village are always very happy, and they don't have just not even the basic things.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a genius for making ourselves unhappy and twisting ourselves in knots about it, I mean, that's it's really unfortunate cultural tendency. It's fueled by a lot of dissatisfaction. Things are not the way I want them to be.
I understand the Burmese are some of the happiest people in the world and also some of the poorest.
Well, yes, according to GDP, and there's a big argument in Peter Hershock talks about this, how we base everything on GDP and not on the actual ways that people live. So people who live an agrarian lifestyle, by definition, they don't have profit. They're growing crops and raising livestock, and so they're not participating in the world of commerce. So they're considered to be very poor, but their lives compared to our lives are quite rich. And he talked about the Burmese have like 3-story houses and live happily in multi-generational homes. So there's a lot of ways that we have of accounting for what success is as a culture that are not really reflective of conditions on the ground. So that's what Sandra is pointing to, that people can have very little and still be joyful.
Anne had her hand up a long time ago. I don't know if
Oh,
she
yeah,
still
yeah.
wants to. Oh,
Well, I was in answer to Kim's question about whistling and whether it was moral to whistle.
Today.
Given the state of the world.
Given the state of the world, I would say when you feel like crying, if you stop yourself from crying, that would be the same thing as stopping yourself from whistling.
Mm-hmm.
It's a feeling. It comes, it goes. To feel like one is better than the other, yeah, seems like it's not really honoring what's going on.
Yeah, these are all expressions of life, real expressions of life. And so that free expression of life, life wants to find a channel. It wants to find its expression, and your unique expression is it. So this is our challenge, of course, to get out of the way of it. That's why the hindrances are important, because our challenge is to get out of the way of the free expression of the life force that we are, let's say, the stewards of. Yeah. So, well, anyway, I think we're coming close to the end of our time, and we should probably do our service.